Welcome to Berlin. It's great that you could join us on such a lovely day. My name is Cristina, and I think I might like to tell you a little bit about myself before you start walking with me for the next 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm 25, I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, and I came to Berlin 2 years ago to study a master's degree. I came here because I got into that program and I wasn't particularly interested in the city. Little did I know I would fall in love. Over the 2 years I've been here, I've had a lot of visitors, and I actually kind of developed my own tour before I joined Sandeman and started giving this tour. And I thought, I don't know, that this was a great way to share the love for the city that I love so much and get to make you a little bit of part of it as well. I'm also going to introduce you to this concept, which some of you may have done in the past or not. The free walking tour was actually born here in Berlin. It was actually created by the founder of this company, when he once went on a crappy tour that he had prepaid for and decided that his money had been just flushed down the toilet. And he decided to just reverse the concept of the traditional paid tour and have people take the tour first and pay afterwards, however much they thought the tour was worth. So that's the way the free walking tours work. They are now present all over Europe and expanding to other cities in the world. And we're going to be together for, like I said, the next 2.5 to 3 hours, and after that you're going to decide how much you believe the tour was worth to you. Free walking tour guides don't actually get salaries, they get paid from the tips that you guys give. So that makes for very enthusiastic and motivated tour guides. Okay, the last introduction I want to make is to the main reason we're here today, Berlin. Berlin, as you all know, is the capital of Germany, and it's one of the craziest, most incoherent places that you will ever see in your entire life. Berlin is a little bit of everything and sometimes nothing. It's always becoming. There was a quote by somebody that I can't remember who it was, but that's fine. I'll catch you on that later. And it's a city that has so much to tell about it that in 2.5 hours we're barely going to scratch the surface. We're going to be walking around its geographical and historical center, Berlin Mitte, and we're just going to, like I said, scrape the surface of its history. But if there's more you would like to know about it, you can do so in some of other Sandeman tours, which cover specific periods in history or specific parts of the city, and I can tell you a little bit more about that as the tour progresses. Now I'm ready. And we formally begin our tour right here at Brandenburg Gate and Pariser Platz. Berlin was founded at the beginning of the 14th century as the capital of the state of Brandenburg. There were settlements here before that, but that's the date of its original foundation. And afterwards, in 1701, it became the capital of the Prussian Empire. The Brandenburg Gate dates back to that period. It was commissioned by King Frederick Wilhelm II. In neoclassical style, which basically means Greek-inspired, and it was one of 18 gates to entrance into the city. It was originally called the Peace Gate, but as you probably can imagine, it had to shed that name pretty quickly because it didn't make a lot of sense. In 1801, Napoleon conquered Prussia, and as he marched into Berlin, he decided that he wanted that quadriga, which is the name of the statue on top, as a little souvenir for his time in Berlin. So it got taken down. However, after Napoleon lost the war and Paris was retaken, the Germans took back the quadriga, put it back on top of the Brandenburg Gate, and renamed the square we are currently at as Pariser Platz to symbolize forever victory over Paris. Nowadays, Brandenburger Tor and Pariser Platz are surrounded by basically the center of power here in Berlin. You can see embassies, you can see banks. Not far we have also the Reichstag building, which currently houses parliament, and it's just very much the center of the city. I forgot to mention before that most of what we're going to be seeing today was completely destroyed after the Second World War. 80% of the district we're going to be walking through was destroyed during this period. And again, this really kind of symbolizes the changes of Berlin that I was talking about. It is always being renovated, restructured, born anew, coming back from the ashes. In Brandenburg Gate alone, during the restoration that they did after the unification, they repaired 20,000 bullet holes just in the gate alone. Why did they wait until after their unification to do that? Well, you might be surprised to know that the Brandenburg Gate was actually in the middle of the death strip during the Cold War. It was technically on neither side of the Berlin Wall. We'll hear a lot more about this death strip, which was basically the space between the two Berlin walls, because yes, there were two, not one. As for the tour progresses, there'll be a lot more to say about that. But let us continue and hear more about the spaces that surround the Brandenburg Gate. This is so awkward. Okay. Remember before how I was mentioning that there are a couple of power symbols around Brandenburg Gate? There are two things that you may not know from the square where we're at that are really worth mentioning, things that you can't necessarily see. The first is that inside that building, the DC Bank building, there's a beautiful sculpture by Frank Gehry that is really worth a visit, even if you just peek in. It really should be displayed more prominently because it is a truly wonderful piece. And second, right here to our right, we have the Adlon Kempinski Hotel. Probably the most expensive hotel in the city, where anybody that comes to Berlin stays. Barack Obama stayed here recently. All the personalities stay here. And one of its most famous guests was Michael Jackson. Because when he was here, from a window on the 4th floor, he famously hung out his baby for all of Berlin to see. This unofficial stop in our tours because I really think that these two things that we're in front of right now merit a little bit of a comment. The first, right here, is Tiergarten. It's one of the biggest and most beautiful inner city parks here in Berlin. Only Tempelhofer Feld is bigger. It was originally fenced on the outside to prevent wild deer and boars from escaping. And the reason there were deer and boars in Inner City Park is because it was originally conceived as a hunting space. First for the electors of Brandenburg and then for the Prussian monarchs. Frederick II put an end to this tradition in the late 18th century and turned it into the park we know today. You may have noticed the column at the middle of the park, which we see at the end of this avenue here. It's called the Victory Column, and it was erected in 1846 to commemorate the victory of the Prussian army in the Prussian-Danish wars. Behind us is the Reichstag building. The Reichstag building definitely deserves a visit, but I couldn't not say anything about it. The Reichstag building was originally erected in 1863, if I'm not mistaken, to house the Imperial Diet. It served as the House of the Imperial Diet until 1933, when it was burnt down during a fire. This is coincidentally also the year that the small mustache problematic man came into power here in Germany. The building fell into disuse after this fire. It was partially refurbished during the 1960s, but it was not used again as a seat of parliament until after the German reunification in 1990, and it now houses the German Parliament, or the Deutsches Bundestag. Okay, everybody, this is the memorial for the official name is the Memorial of the Murdered Jews of Europe. Some people also refer to it as the Holocaust Memorial. However, this name is sort of incomplete, as this particular monument was erected to commemorate the 6 million Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust, but it does not represent the total of 11 million people that actually perished during this time. There are other memorials in the city that commemorate other groups. There's a memorial for the Sinti and Roma of Europe inside Tiergarten. There is a memorial for the homosexuals persecuted by the Nazis, also not very far from here. This particular one is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. I would like us to have more of a discussion about this memorial in a couple of minutes. After we make our way through it. But before you do, I'd just like to remind you that this is a memorial site and that we should really behave accordingly. It's important not to stand on the concrete pillars. Sitting is okay, but not to stand on them, not to take pictures that might seem disrespectful, and basically to conduct yourselves in a way that is respectful of the fact that we are in a memorial. I'm going to give you a minute to go across the memorial, but please do it quickly. It's very easy to get lost in there, and I will see you on other side, straight on the other side of the memorial, okay?